All right, class. So in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at how we can solve consecutive integer word problems. And before we get into our examples, let's look at some important key concepts that we need to go over, like the definition for consecutive integers. Consecutive integers are integers that follow each other in order, with each number being greater than the previous one. Okay, so that's the definition. Now, what I mean by in order is one number after the other. But if you notice in the next part, we have three different types. We either have consecutive, consecutive odd, or consecutive even. And if we look at those, far as like, let's look at the consecutive side first. What you're going to see is that you have your first number. And when you solve these problems, you're going to get the first number every time. Okay. But what we have to do is we have to go from that first number to the next number. So with consecutive, if you notice, if I go from like one, I'm going to the very next number. For me to go from one to two, all I had to do was increase it by one. And then we still use that first number to get to what is called considered to be the third number. So if I go from one, which is my very first number, all the way to my third number, what did I have to do to one to get it to be three? I had to add two to it. So when we look at consecutive, for us to go from the first number, so this will always be your first number, to get to the second, we had to add one. For us to go from the first number to the third number in our answer, we had to increase it by two. So if we do the same thing looking at consecutive odd, so we always going to have our first number. That'll be the number that we get when we solve. Okay. So this is the first number. Now, for me to go from my first number to what is my second number in my answers, in this case, because it's odd, it's not like I'm jumping to the next number right behind it. So my jump is a little different. But for me to go from one to three, the difference or what I have to do to one to make it three was to increase it by two. And it's the same thing. Now I'm going from my first number to my third number in my answer. But I'm going from one to five. Okay. So for me to go from one to five, there's an increase that got to happen. So what would I do to one or to my first number to get it to be my third number? But in this case, my first number is one. So what did I do to one to get it to five? I had to increase it by four. Okay. So if you notice, like with consecutive, it's increasing one, two. But for consecutive odd, it was two, four. Okay. Now let's look at consecutive even. With consecutive even, you're always going to have your first number, just like you had with the other two. Okay. So with an even number, my first number will more than likely be an even number. So this will be my first number. For me to go from two to four, what did I do to two to become four? I had to increase it by two. And then what did I do to two to make it to my third number, which is a six? I had to increase it by four. So when we read these problems, if they just say consecutive, we're increasing from the first number we get to the next number and to the third number by one. So it'd be like one, two. But for me, when it look at consecutive, odd, and even, consecutive, odd, and even, when you look at those, they're increasing by two and four. Okay. So you always get your first number, then you use your first number to get to your next two numbers. Okay. So when we look at the examples and the steps, we actually see how we get all three numbers and we'll go from there. Now, before we begin the examples, let's look at some helpful hints. It says in all consecutive integer problems, your first integer, which is the one you're going to always get once you solve, okay? The first integer is going to be referred to as the smaller or the smallest. The second integer is going to be referred to as the middle. And the third integer is going to be referred to as your larger or your largest one in your list. Okay. Now, the steps we're going to follow when we go through and solve, we're going to first read the problem. That means we're going to go through that problem and pick out keywords. Then we're going to name the expressions. So what I mean by naming the expressions is once you read it, you'll know how many numbers you need. So meaning when we set it up, it's either going to be X, x plus 1, x plus 2, or it can be x plus 2, x plus 4. If you're solving for 3, or if you're solving for 2, or if you're even solving for 4. Then we're going to set up the equation. Once we set up the equation, we're going to solve the equation. And then we're going to find all three integers and answer the question that is given to us. Okay. Now, as we move down a little bit more, I did complete a full example walking you through the steps. So questions will be similar to like, what are three consecutive numbers that have the sum of 36? So three numbers we're looking for. Consecutive means they're in a row and they have to add up to be 36. So if we follow the steps that are given, it says the first thing we're going to do is we're going to read the problem. And when we read the problem, we'll pick out our key facts or key information from that problem. Like when we read it, you'll see it says the word consecutive. Consecutive verifies the plan, meaning we're looking for three numbers in a row. There was no mention of even an I, and we're looking for three numbers. Okay. So three consecutive integers, meaning again in a row. Now we're going to name our expression. So when we name our expression, the first one will always be x. The second will be depending on whether it's even or odd or just regular consecutive. But in this case, it's just going to be x plus 1. And then for me to get my third number, I got to do x plus 2. So we set up the equation. And remember that the word sum means add. So when we set it up, you basically just putting all three of your expressions in a row, putting plus signs in the middle, and they're going to equal whatever they told you the sum should be, which is in this case is 36. So now we're going to solve that. And as you can see, the steps that I took to solve, which is here. And then we're going to find all three of them by moving from the very first one that we found, which is the 11. And we're going to move to the next one, which is behind it, by increasing it by 1. And then we're going to take 11 and increasing it by 2. And that's how we find all three of our numbers. Okay. Now that we got a little bit of background about what we're about to do for our examples, let's move to our first example. All right, so for our first example, it says find three consecutive integers whose sum is negative 66. So we read the problem. We're going to pick out what is important. Like they said, the word three. Three means we're looking for three numbers. Okay. Consecutive means they have to be in a row. Their sum, which we're going to find out means add, is negative 66. So after we underline what is important, the next thing we do is we set up our expressions. We know we need three numbers. So the first, we're going to say that one's going to be x. Our second number is going to be x plus 1. And then our third number will help us get x plus 2. Okay, because there's no even and odd, we counting in a row. There's no jumps. Okay, so x plus 1, x plus 2. Now we're going to set up the expression. Remember, saying it got to be added together. So we're going to do x plus the second one, which is x plus 1, plus the third one, which is x plus 2. And it has to equal negative 66. Now what we're going to do is to solve it is we got to combine like terms and then simplify, either add or subtract, or then the last thing we do is divide. So if we combine in our like terms, our first set of like terms we got is x. There's an x here and another x. So combining those, there are three x's. Then we have a positive 1 and a positive 2. If we combine those, that's plus 3. And they're going to equal negative 66. Okay, so we combine our like terms. Now we can start solving. This is like a two-step equation. So I'm going to solve and get x by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this positive 3 with no variable and move it to the other side by subtraction. Because it's positive on one side, when I move it, it becomes a negative. That one is gone because I moved it. Now we got negative 66 minus 3. That's going to give me negative 69. And then I just bring down my 3x. Now for me to get x by itself, the last thing I'm going to do is divide by 3 on both sides. That cancels out the double 3's in division, leaving me with x is equal to negative 23. Okay. Now my answer, or my first term, is negative 23. So now I can put that beside the x because I know exactly what that one is. Now for me to get my next term, I'm going to take the same answer that I got for x, which is negative 23, and I'm going to add 1 to it. Now, signs are different, so you know it's really subtraction. Negative 23 plus 1 becomes negative 22. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my third term. I'm going to take the answer that I got, which was negative 23, and this time I'm going to add 2 to it to get to my third number. And if I take negative 23 plus 2, that's going to give me negative 21. So that means the final answer for these, the three terms or the three integers that we get, is going to be negative 23, negative 22, and negative 21. So these are the three integers that will add up to be negative 66. All right, so example 2 says find three consecutive even integers such that their sum is 42. So our important information is that we need three numbers. They have to be consecutive even this time. And remember when we did before, evens are by twos, such that the integers are their sum has to be add is 42. So we got to add three of them together. So let's set up our first term is going to be x. Second term is going to be x plus 2. And our third term is going to be x plus 4. So now we set up our equation. So that's going to give me x plus 2 plus x plus 4 is equal to 42. Combining our like terms, we got an x here, x here, x here. So that's a total of 3 x's. And then we have a 2 here and a 4, both positive, so that's going to be a plus 6 equals 42. Now that we have our expression combined, let's go ahead and solve it. That's going to be me moving this positive 6 to the other side, which makes it a negative 6. That 6 goes away. 42 minus 6 will give me 36. It's going to equal to, and we're going to bring down that 3x. Finalize that, you're going to take and divide by 3. And when you do that, you're going to get x is equal to 12. So now we know what x is equal to, which is 12. Now you use that 12 to get to our second number. So it's going to be 12 plus 2, which now be 14. And then we use that same 12. And now we're going to add 4 to it. That'll become 16. So that means the three numbers that have a sum to be 42 will be 12, 14, and 16. And that's the answer for example 2. Now let's move to our last example. In our final example, it says 5 times the second of three consecutive even integers is 6 more than twice the sum of the first and third integer. Find the middle even integer. Okay, so if we go through and we pinpoint what is important, 5 times is important. We're going to do 5 times the second. There is 3 consecutive even integers that we're going to have that is 6 more than twice the sum of the first and third integer. Now the question wants us to really focus in on finding just the middle even integer. Okay, so we got to set this up, and when we set it up this time, we're going to do a little bit more in Desmos. It says 5 times, so we know 5 is the number that we're going to use. So we're going to go ahead and just jot down 5. Times for us means multiplication, so that means we're going to put parentheses. But now, before we go any further, don't forget we have to set up our 3 terms. Okay, so our first term in this will be always, which is x. Second term, because it's even, is going to be x plus 2. And then our third term is going to be x plus 4. So, but it says 5 times the second. The second one is x plus 2. So I'm going to throw in the parentheses, I'm going to put an x plus 2 here. And I'm going to close it. Now it said is. I highlighted is because is one of those words that we can use for equal. So I'm going to put an equal sign. And it says 6 more than. Six more than means that I'm gonna be adding six to something. Okay. So I'm gonna put a plus six off to the side here because I have to add six to something on that side. Then it says twice the sum of the first and third integer. Twice is another word for multiplication. Twice means two. So I'm going to put a two with a parenthesis, and it says first and third. First and third means the first integer and the second. The first integer and the third integer, I'm sorry. So that means we're going to have x plus 4 in the parenthesis. Okay? Now that we have the equation set up, this can be solved by hand, but you can also do it in decimal. So I'm going to do it both. Okay? Now, because I have two x's inside the parenthesis that you see here, I want to combine those first before I do anything else. So that's going to be two x's in there. So I'm going to put two parentheses, 2x plus 4, bring down my plus 6, and everything else I did not touch. All right, so now I'm going to do distributive property. That's going to give me 5x plus 10. And then this 2 is going to be distributed into this set of parentheses. So that's going to give me 4x plus 8. And then I bring the positive 6 down. Now I'm going to combine my like terms, which is the 8 and the positive 6. That's going to give me 8 plus 6, which makes 14. I bring my 4x down. That was a positive 14. And I bring everything else down. Now I'm going to get all my variables on one side and I'm going to get all my constants on the other. And I'm going to do all this in one step. So I'm going to take the 4x and move it to the front. So when I move it, it becomes a negative 4. And the positive 10 that's up front, I'm going to move it to the back to the 14. It's a positive 10 up front, but when I move it, it becomes a negative 10. Anything that doubled up will be marked out. So that's really 5x minus 4x, which is 1x. And then we got 14 minus 10, which is 4. We're going to divide by 1. And this one tells me that x is just 4. So really what we get is first number is going to be 4. Now, if I was to do this in Desmos, because I have an equal sign in the middle, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 5 parenthesis x plus 2. All right. So I'm not going to type all of it in one line. I'm going to split it because of the equal sign. So that means on the other side, I'm going to put 2 parentheses x plus 4. Close that and then put my plus 6 with it. Okay. Now, once you get all that into Desmos, what you're looking for is these two lines. So with these two lines, you're looking for the point where they cross. So if you notice that it was kind of a bigger gap here, but it started getting smaller. So if we click, it's going to give us an order pair. So in that order pair, you'll see there's two numbers. There's an x value and a y value. Because the equation has x in it, we're only looking for the x value, which is the first number. So that's how x is 4. Okay. Now, you saw it in Desmos and by hand. We're going to get the other two numbers. So we're going to take the 4. We're going to add 2 to it. That's going to give us 6. And I'm going to take that 4 and add 4 to it, which will give us 8. So in this one, our three numbers are 4, 6, and 8. But they only wanted us to focus on the middle. And the middle number was 6. So the answer for this one would be 6. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to show is just a chart of some keywords that I want you to remember. So I'm going to pause it for a second. I want you to copy these down because they'll be helpful for you in your notes. Okay. But other than that, that's how we're going to be finding consecutive integers when they're word problems. We got to set up the equations and solve. Okay. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.